Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. I am back from my vacation, so now reviews should be able to resume regularly. So let's get right into it. This time around, we're talking the Doctor Who episode Robot of Sherwood. This is one when it was announced I was really looking forward to, just because the name sounded like it would be a really interesting story. And also, the episode Robot is one of my old Fourth Doctor favorites. But anyway, let's just kind of get right into things. And overall, honestly, I didn't really like this episode very much. It sort of feels like somebody said, hey, you know what? Remember that old episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where everybody was running around in Robin Hood gear? Let's do that with the Doctor, but let's make it even sillier. And it's not that comedy doesn't have a place in Doctor Who, but just really, really cranking it up to this high level. I mean, it's basically the Doctor appears in an episode, not an episode, in the movie Robin Hood Men in Tights. You ever see that? Great movie, but yeah. All right, so anyway, let's talk about some of the good stuff. First of all, despite me not really totally being down with this as a comedy episode, there was some genuinely hilarious stuff here. I guess my big thing is the episode itself felt overly silly, but some of the comedy within it was really great. Seeing the Doctor, I have a hard time calling him Robin Hood. Like the Doctor's fight at the beginning of the episode with the spoon. It's basically watching him beat up a Green Arrow cosplayer is really what it felt like. But it was still pretty hilarious. And the bickering with Robin Hood in the dungeon and Clara ultimately being taken away because she's clearly the most intelligent person there. That was great. And apparently the Doctor's arguing with Robin Hood in that scene was patterned after some stuff from that famous British show where Rowan Atkinson and Hugh Laurie earned so many of their fans. I'm speaking, of course, of Blackadder. I've only ever watched a little bit of Blackadder, but from what I've seen, it really does live up to its reputation as being comedy gold. It's that very British style of humor at some of its very, very best. And I'm one of those people. I really do enjoy British humor. You have to think about it a little bit more, I think, and that's kind of what appeals to me, I think. But anyway, so yeah, so there were some moments where the comedy in this episode was genuinely very good, and well, okay, definitely great stuff from Peter Capaldi and Jenna Coleman and the guest stars. The guy that played Robin Hood, and remember, I'm terrible at remembering actors' names. He was clearly having quite the ball with it. The Sheriff of Nottingham guy also clearly enjoyed hamming it up. The problem is with this episode, there's just so much of it that is just silly, but not in a good way. I mean, I've already basically feels like an even more ridiculous thing with than the Robin Hood episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. That's my big one there. And believe me, I could sit here for probably 20 minutes and bitch and complain about all the stuff in this episode that I flat out thought was dumb. Like, why are the robots kidnapping peasants who need sleep and food and all this other stuff? They're robots. Why don't they just do all that work themselves and just have the Sheriff of Nottingham round up some human goons to collect the gold? But, again, let me just flat out say, in terms of the story of this episode, I didn't really like it. And I really wish that they had give us a more clear explanation as to what was really going on. Now, I'm one of those people, I've repeatedly said that, having some ambiguity in a story is not necessarily a bad thing. But there is a limit to that. If I walk away from an episode going, what the hell was going on there? It's not like the British version of Life on Mars, where you never do get an explanation as to why the time travel stuff is happening. there, that was kind of irrelevant. It was really more about the spiritual side of things, finding a place in the universe where you belong. Here it's just like, okay, there's supposed to be some sort of explanation going on here, but if there is one, I can't understand it. And I guess one of the big things is for me is that the Doctor repeatedly going on about how there's no such person as Robin Hood. Well, yeah, Robin Hood was in fact a real guy. In fact, Little John was also a real guy. The thing is, and I remember this because I watched a documentary about, the real Robin Hood. I think that might have even been the name of it. That really just sort of went in there and talked about what was the real events around Robin of Locksley. And it's basically kind of as they do say at the end of the episode, basically, yeah, he was a real dude, but most of the stuff, this Robin Hood stuff, is just junk people made up over the years. And they do, of course, acknowledge a little bit of this at the end, but I'm like, well, why didn't they just start this from the beginning with, instead of the Doctor saying Robin Hood isn't real, why doesn't the Doctor say, well, yeah, the guy who inspired Robin Hood was a real person, but the story around him is a bunch of BS. And that just bugged the hell out of me the entire episode, and it just sort of felt like they sort of did it a little like, yeah, you people who know real history, we hear you. Here's a little acknowledgement that you're correct. Piss off. So, yeah. The only thing that's really with this episode that sort of saves it from being a real throwaway is that we find out that the robots in this episode were also trying to get to the Promised Land, and apparently the Promised Land is, from what we see on their computers, a planet. And as soon as I saw it, the first thing that popped into my mind is, well, what if the Promised Land is Gallifrey? I mean, that's just kind of the first thing that popped into my head. I don't have any serious evidence to support it, but it's certainly something worth considering. And if that's the case, then, well, what does that say about who Missy might be, huh? But anyway, just kind of trying to think it over again. There are definitely some nice nods to classic Doctor Who. The Doctor even mentions that they might, at the beginning of the episode, wondering if they're not in a miniscope. Nice nod to a Third Doctor episode. I believe it was Carnival of Monsters. The Doctor even employed some of the Third Doctor's Venusian Aikido. We get to see Matt Stanth when he was surprised actually drop into a Venusian Aikido stance, which was cool. I always thought that was one of the things about the Doctor that they conveniently put aside a lot of the time. It's like, I'm pretty sure the Doctor, if he wanted to, could disarm somebody with a gun. But again, maybe it comes and goes with his regenerations as well. Who knows? But anyway, let me see some. Oh yeah, there was a nice nod in there when we were looking at the whole Robin Hood in the media. We saw a picture of Patrick Troughton. Apparently, 13 years before he became the Doctor, he starred on a Robin Hood TV show over in the UK. I remember even reading somewhere when people were talking about this. He was actually the first person to play Robin Hood on television anywhere in the world, which is pretty cool. Also, it's sort of a little bit like how on Torchwood they actually made a reference to John Hurt. So, interesting stuff there. But one other thing is that it was interesting. The Doctor really, for some reason, wasn't wearing his traditional costume. He was wearing some completely different clothes. I was just like, what? Why isn't he wearing the costume? I don't know. Maybe it was in the washing machine or something. Who knows? Although it's still like that, the Doctor probably has to get dry cleaned. Okay, well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else in this episode, and yeah, I can't really think of anything that really jumps out of my mind as being terribly important. I've said it. There's some nice comedy elements in this story that ultimately is just too silly for its own good. And yeah, that's really how it is at the end of the day. But this, I think, might be just kind of a one-off episode. Again, there was really only the one little detail that added anything to the overall plot going on here. So I'm hoping that they're going to start getting more focused on the overarching plot. I mean, we've been told that this is going to be a lot more one-shot stories this season, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't know. I just want something that's, well, frankly, better storytelling and adds more than, a little nod to the bigger picture. But anyway, guys, I've got a lot to do today, so I need to get rolling. Until next time, take care and have a good one.